Thank you very much. Let's push them up a little higher. Thank you. In the TikTok, please click on the heart icon beside the name Sri Oris and join the team. If you're a member of the team, please click as well to drop a heart me, drop a gift, drop something good so that it can get us on the FYP. I was going to say drop something, and I said no, let it be something good. The important thing really is to have, you know, activity in that direction, and then the algorithm picks up on that and is able to recommend the live to others on the FYP. All right, so glad to be here. It's been a minute, but I'm glad we're here. And like I was saying earlier on TikTok, if you're joining us on Facebook or YouTube, just coming in, thank you very much for joining us. So I was saying that we couldn't meet yesterday because I was held up in a meeting. I had a conference on Tuesday, and then I had to be somewhere yesterday, but I couldn't get away from the meeting early enough, and that's why we put out the message on the Telegram channel that we would not be able to have yesterday's session. So people reached out to me. Thank you very much for doing so. I really appreciate that. But we're here now, and I think the first thing really is to change the image to what we're going to be talking about. So give me a second. Let me just quickly do that. Today we're talking about 1966. Hold on. We're talking about an event that took place in 1966. So I'm sure you must have heard about it. I need to tell you something about Aburi and how the federal government did something, you know. There's a lot of propaganda about Aburi. I'm going to maybe just share a few things before we get into the live session proper. But I've had this session before, so I'm going to be playing this video from my YouTube channel, How Ojukwu Rejected Aburi, What They Don't Tell You About Decree Number 8. Decree Number 34 is quite popular. Many people have heard about it. It's, you know, one of the decrees, of course, the decree that was promulgated in May 24, 1966 by Agui. So it's a fairly popular decree, right? Everybody wants to talk about the unification decree. Remember Agui. The other decrees as well. I mean, the decree, therefore, it says that broke Nigeria into 12 states rather than 4 regions. You know, that was in 1967 as well, right? That was where we got the Southeast states. You know, 6 states in the north, you know, and then of course you had Western State and Lagos State and River State and the Southeast State, and, you know, everything making 12, right? So those are, you know, pretty popular, shall I say, decrees, right? But the ones that are not, a particular decree that is not very popular is decree number 8, and I think it's one of the decrees that people should know about. Right, we don't talk enough about it, but I think that not talking enough about it actually is a disservice to our history, and also has a terrible impact on our understanding of Nigeria's history and Nigeria's evolution, and why we are where we are today. All right, now, like I always say, when we talk about these things, certain groups may come up in the conversation, but it's not really about the group. It's just that we're discussing history. You're going to talk about the players. You're going to talk about sometimes the context, the location, you know, the events surrounding that particular historical point. So it's not so much about, oh, you know, people are like this and people are like that, you know, because I know that sometimes some of us historical point. So it's not so much about Some of us sometimes find it very difficult to separate these two things, and then it becomes, oh, it's this person's fault, not Nigeria is like this. If it's your fault, just take it. But that's not really the goal. The goal is not to play blame games. It's just to highlight certain things. So, like I said, I'm going to say some things about this decree, and then we'll listen to that audio, and then afterwards we'll listen to two more shorter ones. For instance, all the times Nigeria almost fell apart from Araba to Biafra, and also the coup before the coup, Ojukwu's silent moves and censors games. But that will come later. So let's quickly do a little recap. A little introduction, I should say, to this whole thing about decree number 8. Even if decree number 8 is not very popular, one word that's popular in today's title is Aburi. You must have heard of that word. It's a place, by the way, in Ghana. We must have heard of it, before. 1 second, please. Just need to do a little housekeeping. If you're on YouTube, please double tap on your screen. Let's like the live so that the algorithm can also recommend it to others. If you're on TikTok, we already know how we do it. Please power tap. We want to let others know what's going on. So please power tap, share the live. Let's put it out there. All right. Thank you very much for your support. All right. So I was saying that one word here that's popular, of course, apart from Ojukwu himself, is Aburi. And Aburi became popular because of the events. I mean, as far as Nigeria is concerned, or Nigerians are concerned, Aburi became popular because of the events that took place between January 4th and January 5th of 1967. Right. So some things that happened in 66, of course, January 15, 1966 was when the first coup was executed that led to the loss of many lives. In the north, in the west, and somebody from the Midwest as well was unalived in Lagos. And we've had sessions here where we've talked about the fact that it was planned in such a way that nothing happened in the east. And so people noticed, the pattern of killings, and of course, what happened after the killings, how certain people took over the entire space, and primarily Igbos. And so when they saw that, they decided to also, have what's called the retaliation coup, which would be the July 1966 Northern Counter coup. All right, so there was a Northern Counter coup in July, and that led to the loss of many lives as well. And I've always said something in this direction that whenever I talk about this, I always say something like, you have to be careful the way you do things in Nigeria. If you strike first, you might inflict damage, but you can never tell what's going to happen when the other person decides to retaliate. So the first coup led to the loss of about 27 lives thereabout, and then the second coup, the counter coup, over 200 people died, most of them from the east. Some Yoruba people also got caught in the crossfire, but yeah, that happened. So with that, July 29th, by August 1st, Yakubu Gowon had become the head of state. Thank you very much, Pretty Yeti. Thank you for your gift. I really appreciate that. They are saying they want 50%. Let's just stick to what we're discussing. Today is not full session, so I won't be able to stop to address everything. But yeah. By the way, when you say they are saying, who are they? There's somebody on TikTok saying they are saying, who are the they? It's important to be very, very clear. Meanwhile, anybody can say anything, right? Just because a fool is gallivanting over the place does not mean that we have to pay him any mind. But don't worry, we'll talk about that later. Anyway, so that happened, and yeah, I was talking about what happened in August. So August 1st, 1966, Yakubu Gowon was made the head of state. And then September was when we had Constitutional Conference, which was when Ojukwu's men began to attack Nigeria. Contrary to popular belief, Ojukwu's issues with Nigeria did not start with Biafran War. It actually started in September of '66 when he began to attack, Nigeria. First was the Federal Palace Hotel that was bombed because there was a conference going on there. That would have commenced the day after the bombing of the building, which eventually they met, and then of course the blowing up of the bridge at Torre and many other terrible things that were done by Easterners. This was long before the declaration of Biafra. Biafra was declared on May 30th, 1967, but this whole terrible thing was going on from September of 1966. So that's, how many months? That's 8 months before the declaration of Biafra. They already said, causing wala all over Nigeria. Anyway, they started having conversations. Things came to a head. Everybody had to go to Aburi, invited by the president of Ghana. And that meeting was where they talked about what they wanted, what the West wanted. Sorry, what North want. What am I saying? What Nigeria wanted and what the East wanted. Nigeria was represented by the head of state, Yakubu Gowon, and also governors of all the regions, right? The Western region, the Midwest region, the Northern region, and even Lagos was represented. There was Mobolaji Johnson, who was also there. So it was an interesting event, and then they had this meeting. But then they came up with something. They had a conversation about a decree, about a plan, and that plan was what was crystallized in decree number 8 of March 1967. So I'd like to just take a listen to this video. Once we're done with this, we might listen to others, but I think this should help us to have an idea what happened after that Aburi Accord. Because a lot of people say things like we are standing on Aburi. And by the way, if you're an Easterner here and you're listening, whenever you say on Aburi we stand, try and understand the fact that you are literally repeating a propaganda that was put out by Ojukwu's people much later, because they gave them Aburi and yet he kept shouting on Aburi we stand. So the question will be, what did they give them as far as Aburi is concerned? So we're going to take a listen to this, and hopefully we're going to get more information on that particular matter. While we listen, please like the live, share the live. If you're on TikTok, please power tap and also share. All right, I'm sure you're going to have a great time. Let's get into the video. So again, okay, let me just read the introduction, the description on the video. So again, the video is how Ojukwu rejected Aburi, what they don't tell you about decree number 8. It's on Busui Ori's YouTube channel. It is wild how confidently some folks from the southeast insist that General Gowon never implemented the Aburi Accord like it's gospel truth. But let's be honest, what many are parroting isn't fact. It is Radio Biafra's propaganda served hot and loud. Here's the part they conveniently leave out. Gowon did implement it. Decree number 8, signed on March 17, 1967, was drawn directly from the Aburi Accord. Even Eastern delegates admitted it captured about 95% to 98% of what was agreed. Still, Ojukwu rejected it. In this video, we break it all down using 4 solid sources to sort truth from revisionism. Watch. Guys, they don't do this thing again, no. Please, if you're on TikTok, please power up. I'm seeing this live restriction. It's too early. What have we said? Anyway, where was I? In this video, we break it all down using 4 solid sources to sort truth from revisionism. Watch till the end. This one pulls no punches. All right, take a listen to this. The book by Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida. No, let me read that book. I'm coming back to this book. Just want to read something, and I'm reading that book for one reason and one reason only. It's a book that people from the East used to taunt people and say, have you read IBB's book? That's the reason I'm reading this book. Just saying. In response to the Aburi Accord, the federal government promulgated Decree 8. I'm going back to that book by Enyo Akpan, but this is now, I'm reading A Journey in Service by IBB, Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida. It says, in response to the Aburi Accord, the federal government promulgated Decree 8, which was meant to embody the accord as understood by the federal government. At a meeting of the Supreme Council in Benin, on March 10, 1967, where Decree 8 was to be ratified by the military governors, Ojukwu boycotted the talks, claiming that the decree violated the spirit and meaning of the Aburi Accord. My question is, was Ojukwu right? Now let's go back to the book by Akpan. This is N.U. Akpan, by the way. The book is called The Struggle for Secession. It says here, the outcome of that meeting, by the way, it was a meeting for the secretaries that was held in February of 1967. The outcome of that meeting was Decree number 8, which in my view faithfully, listen, please listen. So now N.U. Akpan, who was N.U. Akpan? Again, the secretary of the Eastern region, working directly with the military governor, Ojukwu. The outcome of that meeting was Decree number 8. What meeting? On February 17th to 18th, secretaries to the military government, accompanied by legal and financial advisors, met in Benin to advise on how the Aburi decisions should be implemented. That's the meeting is referring to. Aburi Accord was January 4th to 5th. This meeting was from February 17th to 18th. And then the secretary says the outcome of that meeting was Decree number 8, which in my view faithfully implemented the Aburi decisions. As was the practice, the draft was sent to all the military governors of the country. A meeting of the Supreme Military Council was fixed for Benin on March 10th. Benin had been chosen to enable the military governor of the East to attend, since he would not go to Lagos because of the presence of northern troops in the West. The East military governor had no intention of attending. The East military governor had no intention of attending because he had been advised by his constitutional experts not to accept the decree because, quote, it had not fully implemented the received reliable information that he would be kidnapped or arrested once he reached Benin. The federal government had in fact done, by the way, this person is on the eastern side though. The federal government had in fact done everything to ensure the security of all attending. The world press was present. How could one believe, I asked, that with all the glare and attention and interest of the whole world focused on what was going on, the federal government would be so reckless and mean as to arrange the kidnapping of the East military governor whilst attending a legitimate meeting arranged by the federal government to resolve Nigerian crisis? I incurred much displeasure with such an impertinent question and also earned further suspicion and distrust. If you speak against whatever they were doing, then you will be called a sabo, which is what they still call people today. You are sabo. Your friends are sabo. Your enemies are heroes. Congratulations. Now, this man, I'm not going to read everything we read last week. This man went through the draft decree and the legal experts. So the legal expert, let me just read the introduction. The draft decree had gone to the governor first and he had handed it to the legal experts to examine. I keep wondering why he puts inverted commas on this legal experts. Maybe they're not so legal after all. I saw a copy later, but in time for me to study and make counter comments. So essentially, when he took the legal expert's comment of the draft decree, he then wrote his own comments, which he published in this book. It's long. We read part of it last week. I'm not going to read everything. I just want to mention one part of it, and then I'll go to Njoku's book. He says here, I have this morning received a copy of the comments by the lawyers. In considering the comments of the lawyers, I submit that Your Excellency be guided by the following considerations. A, the fact that this draft decree number 8, why is it important? It's the implementation of the Aburi Accord. So he says, the fact that I submit that Your Excellency be guided by the following considerations. A, the fact that this draft decree presents a major victory for Your Excellency's stand and principles. I assess the success to be at least 95%. In other words, decree number 8 would give Ojukwu 95% of what he asked for in Aburi. What does that mean? Let me read just a bit of it so we understand. Number one, they were restoring the powers of the regional governments which had been suppressed by decree number 1 following the army takeover in 1966. Like we always say, Ironsi abolished the regions. You will find it also in Auro's 1968 speech. You will find it in this book by Enyu Akpan. You will find it in Gowon's book. You find it everywhere but the mouths of certain revisionists from the southeast. It was not Gowon that abolished the regional system. It was Ironsi. But what they are saying here is this: with this decree number 8, we are reversing everything Ironsi did. We are going back to the way we were before. And by the way, it was even better than how we were before Ironsi. But let me just read a few of those things. It says, number 1, the restoration of the powers of the regional governments which had been suppressed or depressed by decree number 1 following the army takeover in 1966. Number 2, the vesting in the Supreme Military Council all the powers which used to belong to the federal government prior to January 16th, with the proviso that any decision of the Supreme Military Council which affected the whole country must receive the concurrence of the military governors. In other words, insofar as those matters were concerned, the military governors had powers of veto. What does that mean? All that English, what does it mean? Let me explain. It means that the executive powers will be in the Supreme Military Council. Also, the legislative power will be in the Supreme Military Council. The Oga, the head of state, could not just wake up and say, decree this, decree that. He had to work with the SMC. And on certain matters, they will also have veto. It wasn't just this, and that's why I said that there's no way you're going to be a military dictator and you would agree to decree and you agree to Aburi Accord. It doesn't make sense. And that's why I say everybody who insults Gowon, or who looks down on Gowon, or who just says all this nonsense, it's either you don't know what you're talking about or you're daft. And I mean it. No apologies. If you don't know it, that's fine. All of us are involved in ignorance of anything. You can always learn. But if you choose, you know it too, but you still call him bad names, you are daft. Because the concessions that he made, no military ruler will allow that kind of thing. What you are saying that I am the military head of state of this nation, but guess what? If I want to make decision, the governors will have to tell me and agree to it or not. And if they say no, then we're not going to do it. What then makes you the military administrator or the military? What makes you the dictator? Literally, you're not dictating anything. You are having to wait for your governors to veto whatever. So that's what he chose to do. He's saying here that when I look at you, that Gowon has given you 95% of what you asked for. So what did Ojukwu do with 95%? Let me first read something to you from Hilary Njoku. Who is Hilary Njoku and why should we take him serious? He's not just a human being. He was a human being, but he was also the head of Biafra military. So we should take him seriously. The book is called A Tragedy Without Heroes. So remember what Enyu Akpan said. Enyu Akpan said Ojukwu got 95% of what he asked for at Aburi in decree number 8 of March 1967. And please, I know General Gowon is still alive. Somebody said something, I think it was on Twitter, I was there last week, and someone said General Gowon needs to speak up about stuff, and I said he spoke already. It's inside his book. This is his biography. He was interviewed. He said a lot of things in this book. He spoke. The question is, do you want to listen? So Enyu Akpan, the secretary to the government, said 95% was what the oath, the decree number 8 gave Ojukwu 95% of what he wanted. Let's read another person and what they thought about that. So we're reading this book called A Tragedy Without Heroes by Hilary Njoku. And here's what he says. This is page 118, by the way. One morning, about 10th March 1967, I got to the governor's office at the State House. There were smiles on every face. Mr. Enyu Akpan, the secretary to the military government, was the first person of note I met. He greeted me with the expression, quote, "Shake my hand, we have made it, end quote. I asked what? Gowon has issued the right decree on Aburi, he replied. I later walked across to the office of the governor's private secretary, Mr. Don Egbe. He confirmed the news. He added that as a legal man, he observed that the new decree, decree number 8, contained 98% of the Aburi decisions, and that the remaining 2% was military jargon that could not fit into legal terms. We congratulated each other. As soon as the military governor entered his office, I followed him in a much more relaxed mood. Congratulations, Your Excellency. I understand that a new decree on Aburi is out and embodies all you have been asking for. Who told you? No, I won't accept it. It is too late. My face dropped and I was short of words. Indeed, Gowon had delayed. I'm even what is this delay, Seth? What's the delay? Aburi was 4th to 5th of January. The secretaries met in February. The decree was promulgated in March. And he says late. For make our next year, because I don't even understand, but more continue. Says my face dropped and I was short of words. Indeed, Gowon had delayed in issuing the correct decree on the decisions of Aburi. It is also a fact that the advice of the Committee of the Federal Permanent Secretaries and Executive Council might have played a part both in the delay and the shortcomings of the decree. Aburi decisions reduced Nigeria to a confederation, and what is worse, it created regional armies in the name of area commands. But guess what? This man still gave them. Let's continue. It would have been unbecoming of an officer and gentleman if Gowon had rejected the Aburi Accord completely. For Ojukwu, history will fault him for this strategic mistake. That is, rejecting the decree on Aburi, no matter how late and relatively incomplete. Perhaps he had bargained for more. So here's the question. How do you get 98% of what you demanded and you still walk away from the table? It was after this man said no. Ojukwu, Gowon just said, you know what, I'm not even continue with this status quo. We're going to create states and continue with the status quo of power, like domiciled at the center, so to speak. So just to be clear, when people say things about Aburi Accord, remind them that there's something called decree number 8 that Ojukwu rejected. And that decree number 8 actually gave Ojukwu every single thing he wanted except one thing. And that only thing that it didn't give him was secession. How do I know? Let me read something to you from the speech by Anthony Nauro. Was given 1968, August 12, at Addis Ababa. It says, every conceivable concession was made to Ojukwu, who was then the military governor of the East. The concessions included the following. Number 1, the sum of £500,000 was paid as first installment to help Ojukwu's government in the rehabilitation of its refugees. Ojukwu promptly expended the money in buying arms and recruiting mercenaries. Let me say something just as we continue this section of the conversation. If you're from the East, listen to me and listen good. I'm on your side. The person you think was all that was given money to take care of you guys, and that person used the money to buy guns. That person for you is not the enemy. Is the one who gave him money that's the enemy. Do you really think you are thinking straight? It's just a question. Do you really think you are thinking straight? Efforts were made to persuade Ojukwu to attend meetings of the Supreme Military Council. This failed. Major General Gowon then agreed to the extraordinary procedure of holding a meeting of the Supreme Military Council outside Nigeria. That meeting was held in Aburi, Ghana on 4th and 5th of January 1967. Ojukwu had hardly left the conference before he began to twist the Aburi agreements. By the way, if you don't believe this book, read The Struggle for Secession. Ẹ̀káàbọ mentioned similar things. In fact, there are two books you should read. If you don't believe this one, you should believe this one, by the way. It's from Anthony Nauro. But just in case you hate the idea that this is the one talking, read this one. This book is called Gowon, The Biography of a Soldier Statesman by J. Sarelaiko. Read this one. Struggle for Secession by Ẹkáàbọ. Is there. Ojukwu had hardly left the conference hall before he began to twist the Aburi agreements. The agreements reached at Aburi were subsequently embodied, this is where I'm going, in Decree number 8 of 17th March 1967. I'm going to read that line very slowly. Hopefully people can hear it well. The agreements reached at Aburi were subsequently embodied in Decree number 8, promulgated on 17th March 1967. The decree conferred greater powers on the various regional governments in a deliberate effort to restore confidence among the then component units of the Federation. It says the new decree exceeded in decentralization anything ever before attempted in Nigeria. It was introduced to placate Ojukwu, yet Ojukwu completely rejected the decree and instead demanded the right of separate sovereign existence for the former Eastern region, cooperating only in a few common services with the other regions as sovereign states. That's the only thing Nigeria did not give Ojukwu. In other words, by the way, it gets crazier. I will try and read as much as possible today from this document. It gets crazier. Ojukwu was saying, no, what I want is not to be in Nigeria. I want to be able to have my own country, but I'll still be able to work with you Nigerians as Nigerians. In other words, we're going to be dual citizens. If you think I'm lying, please just hold on. I'll read it in this document. I don't want to jump right now. The only thing Gowon did not give Ojukwu was breaking Nigeria. There's no military leader in the history of this world, to the best of my knowledge, that would agree to this kind of thing. Gowon was from heaven. Well, his parents were evangelists and missionaries, so that church thing, you go they show, even if you're a soldier, you go they show small. No matter what you do, the way you are raised will show. Nobody will concede this kind of thing to anybody. What Gowon did was to help Nigeria. Ojukwu said no. We need to. All right. If you have any questions from these things we're talking, based on any of these things we're talking about, we're going to have a time for the questions to be asked. But I think the meat of what we just listened to really is to expose something that, for the most part, we don't talk about in Nigeria. The fact that the federal government actually bent over backwards in order to get certain things done in Nigeria, but that the leader of the Eastern region at the time was just uncooperative, because, according to his own people, they got one said 95% of what they demanded at Aburi. Another one, Don Egwe, said they got 98% in Decree number 8, and yet Ojukwu said no to that. All right, in case you're just joining us, we'll probably listen to that again much later if we have to, but that's it's titled How Ojukwu Rejected Aburi, What They Don't Tell You About Decree number 8. It's a video on Sri Ori's YouTube channel. But like I said, it's not very long, so we're going to listen to a couple more videos, and I think that should also help. So this one is called The Coup Before the Coup, Ojukwu's Silent Moves and Census Games. It's a bit short, and after this I'm going to play another one. I'll let you know once the time is right. So this is called The Coup Before the Coup, Ojukwu's Silent Moves and Census Games. This, of course, refers to what happened between 1963 and 1964. There was a census crisis in 1964, right? And then the Eastern region began to plan to secede. Sorry, there was a census crisis in 1963, and right, this was when Okpara was the premier of the Eastern region. And then in 1964, there was a constitutional crisis that eventually led to the house arrest of Azikiwe on the orders of Tafawa Balewa. And it was around that period that Ojukwu began to plan a coup. This was in 1964. So just going to talk a little about this, and then we'll move to the other video once this is done. Take a listen to this. Start with this book by Frederick Forsyth, the beloved writer of Igbo people. Like I always say, he's a propagandist. With all due respect, because when he writes, the things he writes, it takes a lot more faith. Let me put it this way. So I think that some writers write like their readers are stupid. I think he's one of those writers. And if you're a reader and if you read books and you notice that the person who is writing is acting as if you're stupid, there's a way you're going to begin to act when you read such person's books. So, yeah. But let's start with him because, of course, he still has some good things that we can learn from. In the autumn of 1964, Emeka, that's Chukwuemeka Ojukwu, called a meeting of the Nigerian staff officers in Lagos and put to them a question. No British officers were asked to attend. The question was this. Nigeria's president was by then an Easterner of the NCNC party. Although a non-executive president, Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe was also holder of the title of Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. But the democratically elected government was of the NPC party, headed by Alhaji Tafawa Balewa, under whom the defense minister was Alhaji Ribadu. In the event of a political crisis and in the event of conflicting orders from president and premier, whom should the army obey? A little background, we had a constitutional issue at the time in Nigeria between the president and the prime minister, and that's the basis for the question Ojukwu is asking his colleagues. No one knew what the question that Ojukwu asked. What was the question Ojukwu asked? In the event of a political crisis and in the event of conflicting orders from president and premier, whom should the army obey? No one knew. No one had the faintest idea. No one had ever thought of it before. They agreed that Emeka should find out exactly where they all stood, and as quickly as possible. He resolved to consult the British General Officer Commanding, General Welby Everard. But before he could do so, Lieutenant Colonel Yakubu Gowon, who had attended the meeting and said nothing, had run to General Welby with a tale that Emeka was holding political meetings. Let's jump to what Welby then told them. The general, that's Welby Everard, consulted the Attorney General and got the ruling. It was clear. In the event of conflict, the officer corps should obey the democratically elected political leader of the country, the Prime Minister, or his subordinates, the Defense Minister. Let's stop there for now. This is going to take us a bit backwards, but it's like one shooter or so. We'll go back small. Ojukwu is asking what to do if there are conflicting orders. When you read the book or the document by Odia Femom, makes it very clear that Ojukwu in that period also met with Azikiwe and spoke to Azikiwe about the possibility of a coup. This was in 64. And then there's another document by David Ejo, the first military governor of Midwest. The book is called Reminiscences. And he said in that book that Ojukwu was planning a coup. There was an interview as well. He said in the interview as well that Ojukwu was planning a coup in 1964, himself and Bassi, and then they were going to work with 3 other people. That would be Victor Banjo, himself, David Ejo, and Yakubu Gowon. And they were able to convince Victor Banjo, according to David Ejo. But when they got to David Ejo and Yakubu Gowon, they went to report to their boss at the time, who was General Foster. When you put the 3 sources together, what you see essentially is the fact that there was a political crisis, but it eventually led to house arrest or detention, so to speak, issued by the Prime Minister that kept the President indoors, until, of course, he eventually had to form government with Tafawa Balewa. But while all this was going on, David Ejo said that folks from the southeast had a problem with what was going on. But just so that it doesn't look like I'm just talking, let me read David Ejo's own account. So please let me open that. So he says, first of all, let me tell you this. When the British were here, who is speaking here? David Ejo, right? David Ejo, that was the first military governor of Midwest. First of all, let me tell you this. When the British were here, we were the last Nigerian officers to be commanded by the British soldiers. The senior person to me in Nigeria was Bassi. The second was Aguiyi. The Igbos wanted to rule. Why they wanted to rule was that Nnamdi Azikiwe was the then Governor General and more or less head of state. The constitution did not give any power to Azikiwe, so this annoyed the Igbo people, and they used to say, how can we run a constitution in which the head of state cannot advise the government? The government cannot contact the head of state for any advice. So the answer was, well, to take over since they were already leading, and yet they had no control over the government. That was why the Igbo soldiers decided to organize a coup. This is not the one of 66, so this is 1964. Please stay with me. But at that time, there were 4 major leading officers, which included me, Yakubu Gowon, Basi, and Ojukwu. Igbo people relied on Ojukwu for the coup, and they were able to convince the Yoruba, which Yoruba, Victor Banjo, you'll see later on. Ojukwu and Banjo now contacted me and Gowon for a coup, but we refused. Gowon and I refused, and they went on their own, but we then reported that to the European officer, General Foster. I and Gowon reported to him that some people were trying to plan a coup. He called all of us, the Nigerian army officers, and advised us not to organize any military coup. So that gives us an idea of what was happening in 1964. And like I mentioned earlier, if you read the stuff by Ojia Femom, he also mentioned how Ojukwu merged Azikiwe with the possibility of a coup in 1964. So what have we established so far? We've established the fact that the idea of taking over power for Ojukwu did not start with Biafra. It started in 64. But the question is, why 64? Because something actually happened in 63, just before what happened in 64. What happened in 63 really was that there was a census exercise that was conducted. So I'm looking at the Tragedy of Victory by Brigadier General Godwin Alabi Sama. It says, the so-called nationalist parties from the eastern and western parts of the country, that those who really fought for independence, which had most of the western educated people, were still bickering and at each other's throats, while the MPC continued to consolidate its hold on power and organize the country, not only on regional but on religious lines as well. The NCNC in particular could not believe what happened in the election results. Their resentment was blatant, and that was the beginning of the crisis. To make matters worse, the census figures of 1961, the first after independence, was more shocking than the election itself. The northern region had a population of 29.7 million, the western Nigeria had 12.7 million, the east had 12.4 million. Lagos had 665,246 people, less than a million. Please stay with me. The total population of Nigeria stood at 55 million. Hell was let loose. Okay, so. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. Okay, so just listen to what's the title of that stuff again? The coup before the coup, just to establish, of course, what happened in 64, and to also say that the idea of organizing coups wasn't really new to the folks in 1966, because they had been aware of something similar in 1964, spearheaded by none other than Ojukwu himself. All right, finally, we're going to listen to one more clip. This one is about 12 and a half minutes. This one is called From Araba to Biafra, All the Times Nigeria Almost Fell Apart. This one essentially talks about the different times we've been close to having, or we've been threatened, I should say, as a nation with secession or by secession, when people have tried to break up Nigeria. And it goes all the way back to 1950. So just take a very quick journey down memory lane and go through that, and then we'll ask and answer some questions before we end today. Tomorrow we're going to have a full session, 1 p.m. if your time was African time. We're going to be discussing something about OWL. We're going to go fully into it, all right? And so, we're going to have a full session. But today, we're close. But before we do, we'll listen to this video on the different times Nigeria almost fell apart, and then we'll ask questions and answer them as well after this. So please take a listen to this. There's a history of secession or a bid for secession in Nigeria, and it did not start with Ojukwu, right? The idea of secession started before Ojukwu, so I'm just trying to put that out there. So let's get back into some of these things. I mentioned it last week. I just said very briefly. Very quickly. Number one, the first time secession was used as a weapon, or that a people proposed to secede, was in 1950. And they were the Northerners, right? They were trying to get, the North wanted to have 50% of the seats in Parliament. The West was against it, but the East was for it. And one of the reasons they were for it, of course, was that the North threatened to secede in 1950. If they didn't get 50% of the seats, the East allowed that to happen. I already read that last week. Today we're going to talk about the history of secession, then we're going to get on into Ojukwu's stuff itself. But it's important to also not to just make him look like a demon. He's the first person, he's not the first person. As a matter of fact, it was the last of that era. Okay? So let's start with Nigeria Legislative Council debates, 16th September 1950. Let's start with the second Lagos member, that's Dr. the Honorable N. Azikiwe. And this is what Azikiwe said. By the way, Azikiwe was in the same party as the East. He went with the stance of the West, but his party, which was the majority in the East, wanted something else. But let's get into it. Your Excellency, this is Azikiwe. I do not intend to waste the time of the House because my views on this report are incorporated in the minority report signed by myself and my friends, the Honorable, the first and third Lagos members. By the way, Azikiwe was representing Lagos at this point in 1950, which is why I also tell people, whenever you speak and people say things like, oh, we used to have a Hausa person who was the mayor in Enugu in 1950 something, remind them that Azikiwe and many others like Ebubedike were also in Ibadan in 1952. This was 1950. Azikiwe was already there, representing Lagos. Let's continue. Your Excellency, I do not intend to waste the time of the House because my views on this report are incorporated in the minority report signed by myself and my friends, the Honorable, the first and third Lagos members. I feel that consistent with the universal practice of federalism in other parts of the world, a bicameral legislature is usually resulted of when an impasse of this nature arises, in order to obviate any particular region from dominating the others. My other objection is in connection with the increased representation for special interest. I feel that it is not sound fundamentally because it implies the creation of a privileged class. Now from Azikiwe we go to the Oni. The Oni of Ife says, Your Excellency, that's Adesoji Aderemi. He says, Your Excellency, I feel I should make some remarks, and that is that I regard myself as a representative of the Western region. It should be remembered that the Western region has expressed the views in favor of two houses, just as a way out of the deadlock we have reached. In doing so, the Western House of Assembly tried to follow the government advice which was given at Enugu that the question of a second house should be considered in the various regions so that we may get over this trouble. I have made my position clear in the select committee that according to Yoruba custom, when a representative is sent by one assembly to another with a message he cannot deal with, any issue newly arising from their discussion, he is bound to refer back home for instructions. On account of that, I cannot say that I agree with this decision, for I have no right to vary the decision of the House of Assembly which sent me. I realize that majority decision was responsible for all we have done on the revision of the Constitution in the past, and I realized the fact that with all the Eastern members supporting the North, listen up, all the Eastern members supporting the North, I'll read it just one more time, with all the Eastern members supporting the North in its demand for 50% of the seats at the center, the table is turned, and as usual, the decision that is reached by the majority would prevail. Nevertheless, as we of the West have not dared to vary the decision of our colleagues in the Western region at the Select Committee, we still do not wish to vary it now. I just want to make that clear. Who was speaking? The Oni of Ife, Oba Adesoji Aderemi. Having said his own, we'll now read what the Eastern representative said. The first member for the Eastern provinces, the Honorable C.D. Oyema, that's Charles Oyema. I'd like to repeat what he said in 45 because it gives you an idea what happened in Nigeria from then on. In 45, he had said, Oyema said, Charles Oyema, just to be clear, he said the Igbo domination of Nigeria is only a matter of time. Just remember that some people were around when he said those things, and some of those people or the generation after them are still around. Okay, let's read. This is from C.D. Oyema. Your Excellency, this matter of representation of our central legislature has been a very difficult problem, which has puzzled the minds of many of us since the Ibadan conference. At Ibadan, I was very much against the idea of one region represented in such great numbers as to balance the other two regions put together. But I have given the matter further thought. And the problem as I see it now is whether we propose to have one Nigeria or to have a break between the North and the South. If we all agree, as we appear to have done, that we must have one Nigeria, then we must then consider what sacrifices we have to make to maintain that unity. I think that any student of history will remember that the United States had to fight a civil war in order to maintain its own unity. If all the sacrifice we make in this country is to allow the northern region, which is also part of Nigeria, to have 50% representation and thereby achieve unity, I think we would have got away very lightly indeed. And then he mentions that, furthermore, we thought that even if we gave the North 50% representation, we still had a council of ministers at the center whose votes, as a matter of honor, are bound to be the same once they have reached a decision as regards government policy. In other words, that's how the East gave the North 50% of the seats in Parliament in 1950. When the North got that, they never want to let it go, which is why you have the lopsidedness you have in the National Assembly today, as per how the North has more seats than the South. All of these things go back to 1950, which is why I always tell people, when problem, always look for the cause of the problem. Once you get there, then you're able to tell how not to repeat the mistake. So even if you fix this thing right now, what will make you not to do it? Two things that I see here. Number one is not even the reason. Number one is like pandering. You pander. Men will be like, say, they just pander, they just give them what they want. But that's not really what happened. Number two is really what happened. What happened was that there was this thing where there's a word I'm looking for. When you look down on the North, and we still do it for the most part in Nigeria today, say, oh, just enough, they don't know anything, they think they don't go to school, doesn't really matter. You are doing it to your own detriment. I said we're going to read a book one of these days. It's a book by Ahmadu Bello, his biography, My Life. When they knew, he wrote it there, that they knew at the time that people used to look down on them, but they use it to their own advantage. So all this when I just look at the North, it doesn't matter. In the name of unity, you concede 50% to 1/3 of the regions. You do yourself. So that's how the East eventually gave the North power. And they did that because the North threatened to break away. You find that also in the book by Adewale Ademoyega. The North threatened to secede if that happened. But of course, they got what they wanted. In 1953, they also threatened to secede. And this time it was Azikiwe who gave a speech at Yaba. I'm not going to read that speech, but it's a very long speech because of time, and that's not today's topic. But that was the second time. That was in 1953. So they did not threaten secession in 1950. They also threatened secession in 1953. Next up was the West. We threatened secession. We didn't even do our own threatening or threats. We didn't, issue our threats in Nigeria. We issued our threats abroad. We're telling, it was Chief Awolowo. Papa was telling the British, like, listen, you guys can have another place for your capital. It doesn't have to be Lagos. We'll even put money down. Go find another place. If you don't do it, we'll go secede. Our own secession was not because we wanted anything from anybody. It was because we wanted what was ours. Because Papa saw today that a generation would arise in a particular part of Nigeria without culture and without respect for anything called boundary. And they will say they own the space. Papa saw it in 53 and therefore said, you guys may want to find another place as capital of Nigeria, we will fund it. And if you're not going to agree with us, we're going to just pull ourselves away. This was in 53. Oyinbo came up and said, no, you can't do that. And then they said all kinds of things. They also threatened us. So eventually we chilled. That was in 53. That's the third time. By 63, the East threatened to secede. Why? Because of the census exercise. I mean, first in 61, but they didn't threaten to secede in 61. But in 63, they threatened to secede. You find that in the book by Graham Douglas. It's called Ojukwu's Rebellion and World Opinion. We're going to go back to that book very soon. Starts the fourth time, right? 63. In 66, the North threatened to secede again. It's called Operation Araba. That was a counter coup. The original idea of the counter coup was not to have one Nigeria, was to revenge or to avenge the people who essentially retaliate, because of what happened in January, and then to break the country into four. When they had Operation Araba, the idea really was to break Nigeria and get the North out of Nigeria in 1966, July 29. The only reason they didn't do that was because they were prevailed upon by the Northern civil servants, the British High Commissioner and the American ambassador, and of course the Chief Justice of Nigeria, who was Justice Adetokunbo Ademola. They were the ones who convinced the North not to secede, because at the time the North already moved everything back to the North, commandeering planes to take them back to the North, telling everybody, all the troops, to move to Ilorin because we're going to have their own Northern Republic, so to speak. But yeah, they changed their minds, and then of course they also changed their leader. So instead of the hot-headed, like was described, Murtala Mohammed, they opted for the cool-headed Yakubu Gowon, who eventually became the leader of Nigeria, the head of state, in 1966, August 1st. All right, so that was 66. Before the second count, before the counter coup, Isaac Boro had threatened to also secede, to form his own Niger Delta Republic. Ironsi was still alive then, and Ironsi and Ojukwu dealt with him because he wanted to secede. So we have the North 50, North 1953, East 63, South 66, then the North 66 again, and then the East 67. So 6 major times you've had the threats of secession, all that happened between 1950 and 1967. Having said that, let's now go back to the book by Neville Graham Douglas. Again, Neville Graham Douglas was the Attorney General of the Eastern region under Ojukwu. So I believe that, we should take it very seriously, his thoughts seriously.
All right, thank you very much for listening.
All right, thank you very much for listening. I think there was one that we didn't mention in that video, and that would be the Isaac Adakabro led secessionist bid. All right, that happened in 1966 before Araba of July. So that happened when Russell was the head of state, and Ojukwu was still governor of the Eastern region. Yes, somebody says, did you check Telegram? Didn't get notification yesterday and today. Oh, you should have gotten today. Yesterday was because I couldn't come up, so I put the notice on Telegram. So please, by the way, everyone, please let's join the Telegram channel. It's Redomi Global. Just search for Redomi. I'm going to type it, but let me just call it out as I'm typing. That's Redomi Global. .me/REDOMI. That's Redomi Global, GLOBAL. So please join the group. That also will help to keep abreast of whatever is happening here. For some reason, I can't type this thing fully, but I can't type it. I don't know what's happening with the keypad. But yeah, that's how to get there. Just search for Redomi. For some reason, I can't type it here, but please search for Redomi on Telegram. You'll find the information there. Whatever is happening to my keypad, that will be sorted after this. All right, so that's about that. I wanted us to just do a bit on the events that happened, before the Civil War, and to also remind us that, contrary to what other people have said, the Civil War did not just happen in a vacuum, right? Or let me put it this way: it's the people that are being blamed for the Civil War are not the ones that should be blamed for the Civil War. And that this whole thing about Biafra, or about all these things that they shall say, and I just slide and lie. All right, we still have some time on our hands. I think it's 27 minutes to 3. So first, let me ask if anybody has a question. If there's none, then maybe we'll listen to another video. But does anybody have any questions? Or does anybody want to contribute? If you want to speak, you can also raise your hand or send your request. I want to know, if none, then maybe we'll listen to one more stuff. Next week we'll do some Victor Banjo stuff, but I don't believe whether also has questions. So I'm going to play, since there's no one asking, there's one more video I think we can play, and that's how Ojukwu fooled Victor Banjo. There are many things to play on this, you know. Mambo. I think we can listen to how Ojukwu played Victor Banjo. This also should help us understand history a bit more. All these are on the YouTube channel, Busui Ori, so if you want to listen to them all over again, please feel free to do so. Not related, what's the value system of Hausa Fulani? Thank you for saying not related, I have no idea. But let's take a listen to this. By the way, Victor Banjo also sent messages to Papa, but let me read to you what Wole Soyinka said about it. It says here, the crux of his message was this: let them understand in the West that I am leading not a Biafran army, but an army of liberation, made up not only of Biafrans, but of other ethnic groups. Again, this is what happens when you think that you are detribalized. Make the governor of the West and other Western leaders understand this. Urge them not to be taken in by any propaganda by the federal government about a Biafran plan to subjugate the rest of the nation, especially the West. Guys, just a pause. If you compare this to the letter that that Ojukwu wrote to Victor Banjo, you would understand one of the reasons Banjo delayed before he tried to enter Yoruba land. Up until this moment, this must be around June, when, because the war did not start until July 6th, right? But Biafra was declared on May 30th. Around this time, Kilorukwe, Victor Banjo was still believing the idea that, I'm just working with him, I'm just trying to get into the West, to liberate the West. But when you read the letter that Ojukwu wrote in August of 66, I've read it here before, we can't go through it, but let me just give you like a little bit of it. The idea basically was that one of the things Ojukwu told Victor Banjo in that letter was that he would give him the soldiers, he would give him the arms and ammunition that he required, but when they go into Yoruba land and liberate Yoruba land, that he and Biafra reserve the right. You know what? I'm not going to read the entire letter, I just want to read that particular portion so that I'll quote him correctly. After clearing the question with my executive council, I, as the commander-in-chief of the Biafran Armed Forces, who is speaking here, Ojukwu, have decided to place at your disposal Biafran forces for the liberation of Yoruba land on the following clear conditions. Let me just read some of the conditions. Number one, you have nothing to do with the military administrator in the Midwest Territory. That's the territory that he, as Oga, went to liberate. Number four, Biafran troops will, after the liberation of Yoruba land, remain in that territory only for as long as we in Biafra consider it necessary for the Yorubas to consolidate their position and sovereignty against any external threat. This letter was written on 22nd August 1967. I'm reading the book by Fadeton Ogunsheye called A Break in the Silence. This, you see the letter that Ojukwu wrote to Victor Banjo. So you are saying to Victor Banjo that Biafran troops will, after the liberation of Yoruba land, remain in Yoruba territory only for as long as we in Biafra consider it necessary for the Yorubas to what is the meaning of only for as long? For as long could be 1 year, it could be 10 days, it could be 3 months, it could be 20 years. Sorry, somebody wrote on YouTube. So the thing is, that was not what they had. That was not the agreement before he got into this. How do I know? Because of what he told Wole Soyinka. Let me read again what he said to Soyinka. He says to Soyinka, he says, let them understand in the West that I am leading not a Biafran army, but an army of liberation. At this point, he had not even gone to the Midwest, though. Shengbo. Yes, he was leading the 101st Brigade of Biafran Army. Yes, he had led the militia, but at this point, the Midwest had not been invaded. Soyinka had gone to meet him in Enugu. While he was in Enugu, he's giving us his plan. What's his plan? Let me read again. Let them understand in the West that I am leading not a Biafran army, but an army of liberation, made up not only of Biafrans, but of other ethnic groups. Make the governor of the West and other Western leaders understand this. Urge them not to be taken in by any propaganda by the federal government about a Biafran plan to subjugate the rest of the nation, especially the West. As at the time that Victor Banjo was talking to Soyinka, he was saying that the idea of Biafra taking over Nigeria was propaganda. He was saying that don't listen to the federal government, though. They are saying that these Biafra boys want to take over Nigeria, want to take over Yoruba land. It's mere propaganda. Don't listen to them. This was in June. 2 months later, Ojukwu writes him a fantastic letter. And this is what he says. Biafran troops will, after the liberation of the Yoruba land, remain in that territory only for as long as we in Biafra consider it necessary for the Yorubas to consolidate their position and sovereignty against any external threat. If you are Yoruba, you're not Moali, at this point you begin to think, wait to. And that's one of the reasons I believe Victor Banjo waited a bit just to think about these things again while he was in Benin. But we'll get to that later. Number 5. On the liberation of the Yoruba land, you will be appointed military governor of that territory. Number 1, that's insulting. Who are you to appoint the Yoruba administrator? Who are you? Let's continue. Number 6. The liberation of Western Nigeria will be a prelude to the liberation of all Yorubas up to the River Niger and the severance of all connections between the West and the North at Jeba. So Ingo help us, we'll take back Western Nigeria. Then we'll not travel all the way to Jeba because, of course, Yoruba land reached Jeba, which is true. But everywhere will still be occupied by Biafran territory for as long as they deem necessary. You see how they are helping us, how they are liberating us. They're just jumping from fire pan to fire. The North is dominating you. You want to liberate Yoruba land and put us under, the domination of the Igbos. That was the bright idea. But let's continue. It says here, this one is mad. During the period of Biafran troops' presence in your territory, all political measures, statements, or decrees shall be subject to the approval in writing by myself or on my authority. In other words, whatever we're going to be doing in Yoruba land will be based on what Ojukwu tells us. After all, they are liberating us, so it's fair, Abi? No, it's not. Number 8. Should our troops arrive, Banjo is a fool for himself for believing him and not watching him closely. Let's be careful not to just call him. This came on the 22nd of August. They've been working together since since June. This was not the agreement. See how he was talking to Soyinka? Look at what this one now wrote on after. By the way, he made sure he did not write this letter until Banjo had already done what he was sent to do in the Midwest. So he made sure he had gone. He was in the Midwest fighting Biafra's war. It was Biafra's war. We'll get there. When he was now there, he now sent him a message. Okay, now go to Yoruba land. When you get there, I'm going to control everything you are doing there. You didn't tell him that before he even left. So I know that a lot of people are angry and saying Banjo is a fool. It's not like that. That was not the agreement. I'm just trying to explain so that we understand that, but we're going to get there. We're going to get there. Originally, the agreement, let me tell you what the plan was. The agreement was, I will fight for you. I'll lead your troops. When I'm done safeguarding your space, you will give me soldiers that I, on my own authority, will then lead. I will then lead to Yoruba land to push out the Hausas and the Northerners out of Yoruba land, and then I'll liberate my own people. That's the issue. And Ojukwu said, oh, that's fine. So whenever you need those people, I'm going to give you the people, I'll give you the money, I'll give you everything. The arms and ammunition, even give him money when we were going to Midwest, but he returned the money much later. We'll get to it in the conversation. So that was the agreement. And that was what Banjo had in mind when he left the East and he got to Midwest. It was while he was in Midwest that this letter was written. I'm going forward, but we'll soon go backward again to go back to discuss how he entered the Midwest. But let's just get this. I want to connect this with his conversation with Wole Soyinka. So Wole Soyinka is saying, tell them all this thing is just propaganda. But 2 months later, I discovered that maybe he was the one who was naive. So he says, you can say he was naive, but you can't say he was a bad person or anything. But naivety is not an excuse anyway. So he says, during the period of Biafran troops' presence in your territory, all political measures, statements, or decrees shall be subject to approval. A vassal state? No. Movies and music? No. He wasn't trying to make Yoruba land a vassal state of Biafra. He was making Yoruba land a part of a new nation. I'll read it to you. I'll get there. Mumbo. Then he says, number 8, should our troops arrive and liberate Lagos? Should our troops arrive and liberate Lagos, the government of the Republic of Biafra reserves the right to appoint a military administrator for the territory. He will be the one to determine the administrator of the Western region. He will also be the one, by the way, he already determined the administrator of the Midwest. We're going to read that later and make sure it was an Igbo person. Then he will also determine the administrator of the West and then administrator of Lagos. Ojukwu will be the one doing all of these things because, again, he's from a better tribe than everybody. He's a special tribe. Then he says that administrator will be in office until they merge Lagos with the rest of Yoruba land up until Jeba. But all the decisions that will be made in that space will be by Ojukwu himself. Now, hold on here. I want to read something to you from Anthony Nauro. The book I was reading from, by the way, it's called A Break in the Silence by F. And the letter I was written was the one Ojukwu wrote to Victor Banjo. Let me read something to you from 1968, 12th August 1968, Anthony Nauro. This is from Crisis and Conflicts in Nigeria by A.H.M. Green. This is page 299. Captured documents now confirm that the intention of the former Eastern authorities was to conquer the former Midwestern and Western regions, and then in a later phase, subdue the former Northern region. This was not surprising. Igbos need to work and trade over the whole country, which they have always known in this century as their country. The rebels did subvert the Midwestern states and occupy it for 6 weeks in August and September 1967. Then their slogan was Southern Nigeria Solidarity, not Igbo Survival, until the march to the west and Lagos was halted at the decisive Battle of Ore in the western state. Ojukwu's goal was not Biafra. Ojukwu's goal was Nigeria. Captured documents now confirm that the intention of the former Eastern authorities was to conquer the former Midwestern region, conquer the Western region, and then in a later phase, subdue the former Northern region. And so when you speak to a Victor Banjo in June of 66 or June of 67, and he tells you they're not trying to dominate anything, what are you saying? They're not dominating anything, it's just propaganda. How is it different from an obedient Yoruba? You're just, I can't go see big deal now. I know this person now, is my friend now, we've spoken, these are my people. And what you notice is that it's a long train. This vision is very consistent. You will see it in the Igbo National Caucus, you see it in the Igbo State Union, you see it in Charles Onyema, you see it in Azikiwe, you see it in Ojukwu. It's a train. You also see it in the generality of some of them. I don't want to mention their names right now, even in Nigerian politics today. It's about the country becoming this. And why? There's only one reason for this. Only one. There is scarcity back at home. That's the only reason. And that thing that they decided to do in the 40s, it's what they still believe. And it's sad. But guess what? I'm not against them. Everybody is free to dream. Two things. Number one, that dream will become their nightmare. It has already become their nightmare. It will be their nightmare from generation to generation, because there's no way you will have that mindset towards other people and you will succeed. So that will be their nightmare. But away from them, the Shebe. Holy Shebe. That's also one of the videos on the YouTube channel. It's called How Ojukwu Fooled Victor Banjo. We had a number of sessions on Victor Banjo, and the final bit of the series, I tried not to listen to it. It's very emotional, but maybe one of these days we'll revisit it. I mean, that's the one that talks about how Ojukwu was killed, and how Victor Banjo was killed. If you want to watch it on your own, you can check it out on the YouTube channel. How Victor Banjo faced Ojukwu's firing squad with no fear. But we'll talk about that some other time. Anyway, it's 2:51 p.m. It's been a fantastic session so far. But let me ask: does anybody want to ask a question? Any questions? I'm seeing things in the comment section, so I might as well just give it a bit of time. And I noticed that this particular background is a bit dark, so let me change it since we're done listening to the video. All right, so this is a bit better. I'm just going to read some of the things in the comment section so far. A few things here, I think. Once again, it will never be cake kilo shele. No, the Yoruba boats will be saved, right? I think it's better for them to be saved than for you to say it will not be well with them, because I mean, everybody evolves. I hope they evolve as well. Someone says Banjo was deceived and trapped. Yes, he was. Someone says it will be their doom, not just nightmare. Kem, you are angry today. Yeah. We have some restrictions on this live stuff. Please let us power tap. Mumbo. Oh, because we've been talking about another app. Okay, so maybe next time I will not be saying another app. Later, sorry. Apparently that's why, TikTok restricted us. Anyway, we're almost done. So that's about that for today. We'll be again tomorrow at 1 p.m. Ife time, West African time, and then we'll get deeper into some of these conversations, especially OWO and the free education policy. We'll be reading a few books, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy that session tomorrow. But before we go, any questions, any submission, anybody wants to say anything? Again, it's Thursday, so we don't stay here for too long on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And again, if you're just joining us, I apologize for not being here yesterday. I was in a meeting and I couldn't get away from that meeting. But today we are here and we're leaving now. But on Friday, we'll be here from 1 p.m. Ife time, West African time. We'll spend much more time here. Somebody says, if true, then why is IBB saying it was not? The fact that you're saying if true is even funny, and that's the funny thing. IBB did not give you any source of anything. It just tells you what IBB was a junior officer. IBB did not know anything, that it didn't know the behind the scenes stuff. So the best way to understand what happened is to listen to those who were there. And by the way, even IBB said it, interestingly, that there was decree number 8 that Ojukwu said no to. It's in IBB's. Another problem, of course, is that Nigerians don't really read. Somebody will just bring something and say IBB said it, and everybody believes it. Have you even read IBB's book? The book is called A Journey in Service. Please read the book. It's not what they said he did. Even he was saying that he was a junior officer at the time. What do you think he would know about the coup being planned? So, please read the book. You said you have not read it. Please read the book. Please read it. But again, when it comes to things like this, you have to read. You have to be. I mean, that's why I try. Okay, let me say it this way. You see, when it comes to these events, if you really want to know what happened, you can't just read one book. Now, you haven't even read that book, so please read that book. But beyond that book, you have to read others, and that's why I quote and tell you the sources. Read this, read that, read this, read that. I'm not saying that because I want to show off how many books I've read. I'm saying that because if you want to get into how I was able to reconstruct the past, you may need to also, check that path. And if you don't want to read those books, that's fine. But the point is, you have to study from different perspectives, from the Igbo perspective, from the Yoruba perspective, from the Northern perspective, from the Southern minorities perspective, Eastern minorities perspectives, from the European perspective, American perspective. You have to read from different sources in order to be able to say, okay, this is what it is. IBB was just playing everybody. He did not say it was not. He said people said it was, but it doesn't look like it was because they said they are going to do this. So it does, based on that, I don't think it was. But then this also happened. By the time you are done, IBB just telling you what different people said and what he thinks. And again, it's what people also do in Nigerian politics. People don't, and it's actually quite crazy. By the way, let me say this. Please, let's power tap on TikTok. Every time you hear people say things like, it's not really them, it's maybe not them, but let's not make it look like it's Igbo. What they are doing is to actually keep the Igbos under their control. And that's the crazy thing. A lot of people don't get it. See, I'll say it this way. There are certain ethnic groups in Nigeria. If you massage their egos, that's all. You just say, oh, they didn't really do it. Have you noticed that the Hausas, Fulani, Gbagi, none of the people in the north ever has any problem with you calling it a northern counter coup? That's what power does. That's what wisdom does. That's what strength does. It takes a lily-livered, weak person to constantly fight about nomenclature when clearly it is people that did it. And when they say, don't worry, it's not really you, what they are doing is they are keeping you as a subservient partner in whatever thing you're doing, because they've now absolved you of responsibility. And because you're not going to take responsibility, you cannot lead. And that's why you will not be allowed to lead. In some cases, if you do something and people say, oh, you didn't really do it, it's important for you to even say, let me just say, I did this, I'm sorry, I did that, I'm sorry. That's strength. That one that makes you run behind somebody and say, boy, he said I didn't do it, that's weakness. So even if he says, okay, it's okay, he didn't do it, they will never entrust you with anything of consequence, because you're a child. You don't take responsibility for anything. That's the story of Nigerian politics. Whatever you are seeing right now is also part of that. A group that hates the idea of responsibility, that always wants to push it to somebody else. I mean, everybody messes up. There's nobody who is perfect. I'm not perfect. You are not perfect. If I'm wrong, and I'm not talking about maybe you do something to destroy someone else. Let's say, for instance, you have a friend, and the friend notices something you've done wrong. This person is not taking on social media. It's not trying to pull you down or anything. They call you and say, my friend, look at what you did. You shouldn't have done this. I mean, you know you messed up. Just say, you just apologize, and then the person knows that, okay, at least nobody's above mistake, but you're able to, move on regardless of what happened. But if they notice that every time they tell you what you do wrong, you retort by saying, am I the only one? What makes you think I'm the kinikon? How about you? I'm not the only one. Even if they remain your friend, there are certain things they will never show you, because they know you cannot take responsibility. That means that you're not mature. There are all ethnic groups in Nigeria that are not mature. That's the truth. Culturally, they are not there. Any culture that absolves itself of responsibility for wrongdoing is a culture that cannot be trusted with leadership or power or anything like that. And I'm not mentioning any group. I'm just saying generally, it's the same thing in the boardroom. It's the same thing in the marketplace, in the professional space. If they notice that you are always, abdicating or absolving yourself of responsibility, nobody's going to trust you with anything. It's just basic. All right, so I hope I answered that question. But please read this book. You know what? Since you asked that question, and you're the only one who has asked a question, let me honor. Let's do this, right? Let us read the place where the man talked about that thing in his book. So if you give me a few minutes, I'm going to find a journey in service, and then we'll read it together. I hope that's fair. Okay, I think I found it. 1 second, let me just open the page. So one of the funny things about this particular book was that, interesting, it's one of the books that made me start talking about Nigeria's history on social media. This particular one. And the reason is that, so the book came out, and then people started talking about it on social media. Everybody said, "Oh, we didn't do it." Habibi said, "We didn't do it," and I'm like, so everybody started saying all of those things. I'm a Didi. Oh, you're the okay. Sorry, I'm going to read some things for you so we can all read together. All of us are learning. Don't worry. Even myself, now small from all of us, they learn. What was I saying? See, as I read this thing, I'm going to tell you what you go find. And I'm going to tell you, let me say it in English. As I read this, I'll be making some corrections, but I'm not making those corrections based on my own authority. I'm making the corrections based on sources that I'm going to mention, and then you can fact check those things. Just because IBB said so doesn't mean and I'm not saying IBB lied, but again, people don't know everything. Even I don't know everything. And by the way, just because the person was alive when certain things happened does not mean they know about it. For instance, all of us, we've been alive since Boko Haram, everything started. There are certain things you know, there are things you don't know. There are things about Boko Haram you're going to be discovering in the next 10 years. Right? Some of the things that you have been told are the things that you are supposed to know, not the things that not the real issue, not the facts of the issue, but just things like, news is quite interesting. News sometimes is filtered through different, things, right? It could be people's interest, it could be national unity, it could be anything. For instance, the concept of Igbo coup has not been said so much because of national unity. And the crazy part is that it has not achieved national unity, which means that you cannot build truth on lies. Yeah? But let me read some things from that book. So I'm in the book now. This is A Journey in Service. I'll be going from page to page, but let's just get into this. It says, talking of the military coup d'etat. This is by IBB, by the way. But please, let's power tap. We are restricted by YouTube or by TikTok because we're referring to YouTube all the while. I guess that's why. But we're almost ending anyway. And of course, tomorrow we'll be careful not to do that. All right, so IBB says here, talking of the military coup d'etat of 1966 brings me to one of the darkest moments in our national history. In the early hours of January 15, 1966, I was woken up from my sleep at about 5 a.m. with loud, continuous bangs on my door by my good friend Lieutenant Christopher Ojukwu. I had just gotten home hours before from a late night party and didn't want to be disturbed. But when the banging persisted, I grudgingly got out to confront a bewildered Christopher, all dressed up in field uniform, screaming at me, "Ibrahim, get up, we have to go." "Go where?" this time I queried in reply. Still breathlessly, Chris continued almost incoherently, "Didn't you hear there has been a coup? We have been told to report to the squadron to see our boss." Our boss was, of course, Major Hassan Usman Katsina. I quickly changed into my uniform as we headed out to the squadron. As we drove past Nasarawa, which housed the minister's quarters and the official residence of Sardauna of Sokoto and Premier of Northern Nigeria, Sir Ahmadu Bello, we noticed that the Sardauna's home was on fire. Chris said he was sure the troops had bombed it. We soon arrived at the squadron headquarters, where Major Hassan Katsina was waiting to address us. Very somberly, Major Hassan addressed us in his office and told us what he knew then. He told us that his friend and classmate at Sandhurst, Major Ojukwu Nzogu, had led a coup d'etat and that Nzogu had confronted him earlier in the day to make up his mind to join the coup or face the consequences of not doing so. Hassan said his agreement to play along with Nzogu saved his life. Major Hassan then instructed us to ensure everybody in the squadron stayed aside. This thing is long. Now, let me quickly say something. What you notice here, first thing you notice is that it says that Ojukwu had led a coup d'etat. Nzogu had led a coup d'etat. Right? Is it true? Yes and no. Nzogu led a coup d'etat in the north. But it does not mean that Nzogu led the coup d'etat. It was in the north, so it was the one who coordinated the coup in the north. It was not the one who planned the coup across Nigeria. But till today, people say call it an Nzogu coup, including IBB. Because he said that, does that mean he's right? Of course he's wrong. Why? How do I know that? Because you read the special branch report, and you see the people who actually planned the coup. Another thing it says here, outside Kaduna, the story was duplicated in Lagos. So he mentioned the people that were killed, by the way. Let me just read it because it's the only question. Later that morning, acting presumably as the leader of the Supreme Council of the listen to this. Later that morning, acting presumably as the leader of the Supreme Council of the Revolution of the Nigerian Armed Forces, Major Nzogu addressed all officers in Kaduna at the brigade headquarters. Is IBB right here? No. And why? And what did you see? What did you notice that he did? He wrote presumably. The thing about writers is that you are very careful of things that you're not sure of, and that's why I wrote presumably. Those who want to carry agenda will just carry that. Sorry, those who want to, push an agenda will just carry that particular information and start telling everybody, "Oh, but he said that he was the leader of the Supreme Council of Revolution of Nigerian Armed Forces." And the reason they said this was because he was the only one who broadcast what they were trying to do on radio. That's Radio Kaduna. That's the reason everybody thinks it was one who led the coup, and that's why even IBB here is saying presumably. But you see, if a person wants to drive an agenda, they don't care about the presumption. They just go ahead and say he did it. Let me continue. So he says, later that morning, acting presumably as the leader of the Supreme Council of the Revolution of the Nigerian Armed Forces, Major Nzogu addressed all officers in the Kaduna at the brigade headquarters. Looking quite ruffled in his bandaged neck and left arm, Nzogu, in a speech in which he referred to us as comrades, informed us that the military had taken over the government of Nigeria and that he had secured northern Nigeria in the name of the Supreme Council of the Revolution. He then appealed for cooperation and understanding from all the officers present. At the subsequent conference, Nzogu elaborated on what he described as Operation Damisa. Damisa being the Hausa word for the leopard. Remember, 1 second.
Looking quite ruffled in his bandage neck.
Let me go back a little. So he says, looking quite ruffled in his bandage neck and left arm, Nzogu, in a speech in which he referred to us as comrades, informed us that the military had taken over the government of Nigeria and that he had secured northern Nigeria in the name of the Supreme Council of the Revolution. So he, Nzogu, was still, under that impression that they were trying to get revolution in Nigeria, just like his friend Adewale Ademoyega. not knowing that they were being used. Let's continue. How do you know they were being used? When they were done, I think I read this last week. What did Madiebo do? What did Ojukwu do? How did they get him to surrender to Ironsi? They didn't really want any revolution. The only revolution they wanted was ethnic. But let's continue. He then appealed for cooperation and understanding from all the officers present. At a subsequent press conference, Ozogwu elaborated on what he described as Operation Damisa. Damisa being the Hausa word for the leopard, which never changes its spot, describing the operation as a necessary service to our country to rid it of all its filth and corruption. Later in the day, the gory details of what had happened, not just in Kaduna but other parts of the country, started to emerge. In Kaduna, the Premier, Sir Ahmadu Bello, his senior wife Hafsatu, his senior assistant security secretary, Malam Ahmed Ben Musa, Ahmed Pategi, a government driver, and the head of his bodyguards, Zarumi, had all been killed before the break of dawn. There were other killings in Kaduna. The commander of the 1st Brigade of the Nigerian Army, Brigadier Samuel Ademulegun, and his pregnant wife, Latifa, whom every senior officer jocularly referred to as CC nurse, was gunned down in their bedroom. I might just add, she was 8 months pregnant. Not far away from the residence, the deputy commandant of the Nigerian Defense Academy, Colonel Ralph Shodende, was also murdered. Outside Kaduna, the story was duplicated in Ibadan and Lagos. In Ibadan, the deputy premier, Chief Remi Fani-Kayode, was arrested and detained. The premier, Chief Samuel Laduka Ketola, was not so lucky. The coup plotters killed him after he tried to put up a fight. The Lagos scene was just as horrific. Apart from Prime Minister Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa and Finance Minister Chief Festus Okotie-Eboh, who were kidnapped from the residences and later murdered, much of the leadership of the Nigerian army was wiped out by the plotters. The Adjutant General of the Army, Lieutenant Colonel Yakubu Pam, was the first to be picked up in the presence of his wife, Elizabeth. He never came back alive. Then came the turn of the acting chief of staff at Army headquarters, Colonel Kerr Mohammed, who was also assassinated. Lieutenant Colonel Abogo Lagema, then the commander of the 4th Battalion at Ibadan, was not spared either. He was gunned down at his Federal Palace hotel room in Lagos. But one of the most painful was the killing of Brigadier Zakaria Memalari, having only just remarried a month before the January coup following the tragic death of his wife, Miriam. Memalari was at 36 considered one of the finest officers of the Nigerian army. Again, it wasn't Igbo, so they could unalive him. Guys, we'll be telling ourselves the truth. As I stated earlier, he embodied the best of the military: discipline, courage, service, respect, integrity, and enduring leadership skills. As the commander of the Southern Brigade, he had all the fighting forces of the battalions under him: the Field Artillery Corps, the Armored and Mechanized Squads. It was said then that Memalari could mobilize the entire brigade to fight back in the event of a foreign attack. That was how important his position was at the time. The coup plotters knew that he needed to be eliminated for them to succeed. He initially escaped the mutineers when they struck at his 11 Thompson Avenue residence at Ikoyi, Lagos. But when from his hiding place in the shrubs around his home, he spotted his chief of staff and brigade major, Major Emmanuel Ifajuna, driving past, he came out of hiding, believing he was safe. Unknown to him, Major Emmanuel Ifajuna was one of the plotters. Almost instantly, Memalari was gunned down by his chief of staff. By the way, by morning of that day, when Ironsi started telling them where to go, one of the places he told them to go was actually 11 Thompson Avenue. That was Malari's place. That was where Malari was at the time Okafor went to, try to kill him. And when he escaped, he ran into the hands of his own chief of staff, thinking that it was with a sensible human being. But apparently, he was killed by Ifajuna, Zogu, and some of the other coup plotters, and federal military government and supreme commander of the armed forces of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. It was a terrible time for the Nigerian military. As I have said elsewhere, as a young officer who saw all of this from a distance, probably ethnic sentiments did not drive the original objective of the coup plotters. I've read all of that to now get into the thing that the interesting people on social media are saying IBB said. Please listen to what IBB actually said. It says here, as I have said elsewhere, as a young officer who saw all of this from a distance, probably ethnic sentiments did not drive the original objective of the coup plotters. What do you see in there? He was a junior officer. He saw things from a distance, and he's saying probably ethnic sentiments did not drive the original objective. Again, anybody, I mean, when we were growing up, you listen to Edward, if you read Tell, Newswatch, there's a word they usually use for Bangida. They called him Maradona. They called him Maradona, and he was just Maradona in everybody. And now let me explain the other things that he said. And at this point, I'll begin to speak up. From point to point, I'll be debunking some of the things he's saying. Because again, he had already said, probably, he's not ethnic. He also said that he was a young officer. He also said he was looking at things from afar. Right? He said he saw it from a distance. In other words, he was not in the thick of things. Just because the person was alive at the time does not mean that everything he's saying is right. A person might be born 1,000 years later and is able to tell you a better story of what happened. Why? Because they're able to study it. So let's get into Babangida's way of explaining his own position. He says here, for instance, the head of the plotters, Major Cardinal Zogu, that is number one foul. Zogu was not the head of the plotters. The head of the plotters was Ifajuna. As we go on, we start seeing the things that how Babangida was playing his game. The head of the plotters was not Nzogu. In the north, it was Nzogu. As a whole, it wasn't him. Listen, Nzogu was not even the original planner. Zogu came, and I think by now, if you've been here, we've talked about the coup a number of times. By now, you must have heard, who planned those coups. I'm sure, who planned that coup? I'm sure a lot of people here already know. Okafo, Oji, Fajina, and then later you had Chokuka, later you had Anuforo. Then number 6 was Nzogu, number 7 was Ademoiga. Baba is starting his own stuff by saying that the head of the plotters. That statement already tells me that he's wrong. The premise is wrong. Whatever is going to build on it will be wrong. Therefore, the conclusion will also be wrong. But thankfully, he has already given us his conclusion before he even tries to explain it. He said, probably. So he said the head, for instance, the head of the plotters, Major Cardinal Zogo, wrong, was only Igbo in name. Born and raised in Kaduna, his immigrant parents were from Okpanam in today's Delta State, which in 1966 was in the old Midwestern region. Zogo spoke fluent Hausa and was as Hausa as any. He and his original team probably thought, even if naively, that they could turn things around for the better in the country. The only thing that is correct in this conversation is the idea of the fact that Zogo and his people thought they could turn things around for the country. But there's a mistake we make in Nigeria. We think it's an Igbo coup because Nzogu was Igbo. No, Nzogu could be Bariba, I don't care. His ethnicity is not what determined the objective of the coup. And these are important things to note because again, we're not the regular Joe. We're not having a pedestrian conversation. We say, oh, Igbos did it. Igbos were many there. It doesn't matter. You could have one Igbo person and have 1,000 other people, and it can still be an Igbo objective. The composition of the coup plotters is not what makes it an ethnic or not an ethnic coup. And I think it's very childish and pedestrian to reduce the conversation to how many Igbos were there. And yes, there were 6 Igbos and one Yoruba, but that's not what makes it Igbo. So, in other words, coming from that pedestrian, point of view, IBB is saying, hey, he's not really Igbo. He grew up in the north. He's also like everybody. Therefore, he's not an Igbo coup. Abba, see, they sent us to school now. Thank God for our. I mean, we can do better than that. Let's read a few more things. It says, that said, it was heinously callous for Nzogu to have murdered Sir Ahmadu Bello and his wife. So now he's going to speak up for the North. This man is brilliant. it takes people who don't really understand where it's coming from to be shouting, hey, he said so. He said probably. But let's continue. He says, that said, it was heinously callous for Nzogu to have murdered Sir Ahmadu Bello and his wife Hafsatu, because not only were they eminently adored. Kem Cake says the ethnic composition is still one of the indicators. No, it's not. It's not. You know why? No matter what you were doing in the 1960s, the majority of the officers that will be involved will be Igbos, because they were the majority in the officer corps of the army. So the fact that there were Igbos there is not what makes it Igbo, because there were more Igbos in the officer corps of the army than any other ethnic group. That's why you will always have more Igbos. The 1964 coup was planned by Igbos. It was Ojukwu and some other Easterners. Then they brought in Basi. Then they tried to bring in others who were not Eastern. So people like Victor Banjo, people like David Ejo, Yakubu Gowon. That was what Ojukwu then tried to do, to bring other people from other regions. But that the original plans of every coup in the 60s in Nigeria was Igbo. Until, of course, the counter coup of July 66. And the reason, of course, because they were more in the army. I'm talking about in terms of the officer corps. They had more officers as far as the ethnicity was concerned, disproportionate to other groups in Nigeria. And that's why if you use that as a yardstick for the for making it an Igbo coup, you might get in trouble, because you will now be playing into and it's a game. You are playing into the hands of that's why the first thing IBB tried to use to shield them is to say that Nzogu was born in the north, therefore he's not really Igbo, he's Hausa, and by the way, he's from Opanam, he's not even from eastern Nigeria. Because they think that when you say it's an ethnic coup, you are talking about the composition. So they're going to first destroy that by saying, listen, this other person gonna say, you said there are 4 Igbos, but let me tell you, all these 4 Igbos, they're not even Igbo like that. They grew up one is in Banjo, one grew up in Kaduna, one grew up in the north. Therefore, you cannot really call it an Igbo coup. Once they say that, what else are you going to say? It's a game. They've been playing this game since 1960s. So, let's continue. So he says, that said, it was heinously callous for Nzogu to have murdered Sir Ahmadu Bello and his wife Hafsatu, because not only were they eminently adored by many, but also because they were said not to have put up a fight. From that moment, the Posh was infiltrated by outsiders. Listen to what Abib is saying. He said it was infiltrated by outsiders to its supposed original intention, and it took on an unmistakably ethnic coloration, compounded by the fact that there were no related coup activities in the eastern region. Who is talking? IBB, that same book. He said from that moment on, the Posh was infiltrated by outsiders. Again, he's wrong. They are not outsiders. They were part of the original planners. In his own mind, there were some outsiders that took advantage of the coup and now made it ethnic. I'm saying from the very beginning, it was meant to be, it was designed the way it happened. But even then, IBB who said it's probably ethnic, is maybe not ethnic, is now saying to you here that, that the coup took on an unmistakably ethnic coloration, compounded by the fact that there were no related coup activities in the eastern Nigeria. Now, if we stop here, I think we're good. But guess what? Let's not stop. Let's read a few more things, because there are some things that somebody might eventually wake up one morning, read the book, and come to talk to you about it. You should know what to, please be able to answer the person very well. So let me read some of the things that he said. So did you notice what Abibi has done so far? He has called it not Igbo. He has also called it Igbo. Have you seen it? Sorry, let me just be sure that everybody's following. Have you guys noticed what Abibi is doing? Did you notice that he said it's not Igbo, but it's unmistakably ethnic coloration? Share notice IBB is playing everybody. That man is brilliant. Right? Then you say, oh, there was an original plan and it was hijacked. No, it was designed to be this way. And that's why Ironsi knew about it before it happened. So Ironsi just came in and tried to save the day and took advantage of everything. And everybody that could be a threat to him was unalived. Did IBB stop playing the games there? No. Let me read a few more things that Yeah, he also mentioned outsiders. There were no outsiders. When you read the special branch report of April 1966, you discover that the people he called outsiders were part of the planners. Do you know what the police report said? That there were civilians who worked with the military guys and who executed it. Some of those civilians, you already know them if you've been in any of these sessions where we talked about the coup of 66. They were not outsiders, they were insiders. And some of them wore uniforms, some of them didn't wear uniforms. Let's read a few more things. So IBB has told us he's not Igbo. He has also told us he's unmistakably Igbo. Then now he's going to tell us he's not Igbo again. Listen, no. It should, however, be borne in mind that some senior officers of Igbo extraction were also victims of the January coup. For instance, listen to what it says. It says some senior officers. Shengbo, it says some senior officers. That's plural. Let us listen to IBB tell us who those senior officers were. It says some senior officers of Igbo extraction were also victims of the January coup. For instance, my erstwhile commander at the reconnaissance squadron in Kaduna, Lieutenant Colonel Arthur Chinyelu Unegbe, was brutally gunned down by his own brother, Major Chris Anuforo, in the presence of his pregnant wife at his 7-Point Road residence in Apapa for merely being a threat to the revolution. As a disciplined and strict officer who, as the quartermaster general of the army, was also in charge of ammunition, weapons, equipment, vehicles, and other vital items for the army, the coup plotters feared that he might not cooperate with them. How many names have we heard now? The senior officers of Igbo extraction who were also victim. He said officers, and then went ahead to tell us one name. I hope you guys are watching. So this is how you.
It should also be remembered that some non-Igbo officers like Major Adewale Ademoyega.
It should also be remembered that some non-Igbo officers like Major Adewale Ademoyega, Captain Ganiyu Adeleke, Lieutenant Fola Oyewole, and Olafimiyan took part in the failed coup. Is IBB right? No. Ah, God, this man is just an interesting character. There are 3 books I'm going to quickly recommend in case you're interested, my brother Amadidi. Number 1, read Why We Struck, right, by Adewale Ademoyega. Number 2, read Nigeria's 5 Majors by Ben Bule. Number 3, please read Special Branch Report of April 1966. If you can, you may also want to read Nigerian Civil War by John Desenjo. Why did they mention these 5 names? Because they're Yoruba. That's why. Of these 5 names, only one person was part of that coup plotting. That was Adewale Ademoyega. Now, when you read the books I mentioned right now, those 4 books actually, but the first 3, you discover that all the other names you mentioned did not know about the coup until hours before the coup. And some of them were Igbos. That's why I say you cannot reduce it to Yoruba did it, Igbo did it. That's not how you know. A lot of them did not know. For instance, Wale wrote a book called The Reluctant Rebel. It's also a very good book you should find. Reluctant Rebel. In that book he said it was around 11:40 p.m. on January 14th that they arrived to pick him up because of course he was in transport, that the person that was supposed to do that work for them was not available or chickened out. So they went to his house to call him, and he got to the house got to Ifajuna's place before 12 midnight, and the Owala started at 2 a.m. It never reached 3 hours. How can you plot a coup for 3 hours? The coup that started planning in August of 1965. Are you telling me IBB doesn't know these things? He does now. The special branch report I'm talking about, it was released in 66. He knows that thing. Ganiyu Adeleke was also brought in at that same time. He was the one who said, please read that book, The Reluctant Rebel. Adeleke said that he wanted to go call his family to tell them where he was, and they said he should go. As he was going, Oyewole said that the officers, the guys, they told another one, say, follow him. He might be the first casualty of the coup. That statement, Oyewole made it, and I found that exact statement in the special branch report, saying that these guys did not know. There was an Igbo guy that was stationed at the P&T by Adewale Ademoyega. He stayed there from middle of the night till early in the morning. When Ademoyega did not go back to see him, he went to his house from there. It was while he was at home that he was arrested. He did not even know that he was part of a coup, and he was Igbo. You find that report in Bengbule's book, Nigeria's 5 Majors. So he dropped these names here because he wanted to, change something. So I used to be like, it's true, there are 5 Yoruba there, that's why. No, there is 1 Yoruba there, and guess what? Even if all of them were Yoruba, it will still be an Igbo coup. Because of the objective. It's the objective that determines, it's the objective, the purpose, not the composition of the coup plotters. What's the goal? What's the objective? What's the purpose of this coup? That's what determines what it is, not how many Oyinbo did there, how many Yoruba did there. That's not how you know what it's about. If I get white people to come and fix Nigeria right now, let's say, okay, I'm Dangote, right? I decide to, I think Dangote just did it, employ the white person to do something. Does that mean that, or maybe you have a lot of Indians on the board? Does that mean that it's an Indian company because there are so many Indians on Dangote? No. Let's go into in all of this. Let us remember IBB has an Igbo wife. Kem cake. I'm not going to say it, but well done. Let's continue. Then it says another officer of Igbo extraction, Major John Obiano, crushed the coup. Is a lie. The person who ensured the coup was crushed was actually Yakubu Gowon. Not even. I wish I was on camera. I would have loved to show you some things. It wasn't even see. John Obiano did what he did, but all of them did what they did because of what Yakubu Gowon did at 5 a.m. on January 15. Because left to Ironsi, they were going to wait until 7 a.m. before they did anything, because he was telling them to chill a bit. Before Gowon said, why should we chill when they already have 2 hours ahead of us? I give you all guys 15 minutes, go get ready. While they were getting ready, Gowon and Ojukwu were with Ironsi. That was when he was dropping the hint. Oh, they said they were not going to kill anybody. It tells you everybody knows. And when he was writing the list of where they should go, he wrote number 11 Thompson Avenue. He wrote the names of people that they should bring to him. The 2 of them, Ifajuna and Oji. 2 of them were original coup plotters. Then it says here, those who argue that the original intention listen to IBB again. Those who argue. See, IBB will not say that it is this, it is not this, it may be this, I think it is that. It will just be playing you. Then it now says here, those who argue that the original intention of the coup plotters was anything but ethnic refer to the fact that the initial purpose of the plotters was to release Chief Obafemi Awolowo from prison immediately after the coup and make him the executive provisional president of Nigeria. Foul. How could I say that? I wasn't even born. Let me tell you how I could say that. 2 books. Number 1, Why We Struck by Ademoyega, who was one of the original 7 guys. He talked about releasing Awo from prison in Calabar. He did not talk about presidency. The presidency came from another document. And that document was not, we didn't even hear about it until 1967. It's about 1 year after, in fact, more than 1 year after the coup was planned, executed, did we hear the idea that they wanted to make Awolowo the president of Nigeria. And it was in an interview that was conducted by Tai Sholari. By the way, the first place you saw that information before that interview was from the Eastern Region newspaper. All the people who planned the coup and wrote books did not mention that thing. As a matter of fact, Adewale Ademega wrote the plan. And the plan was to have military governments and break Nigeria into more states and have military, not the old propaganda about Awolowo being the reason for the coup came from Eastern Nigeria after the coup failed. That's one. Number 2, he said something. Number 2, they said they were going to go to Calabar to release him. You read the special branch report, and it says Of all the capitals in Nigeria, they only planned for 3.
5 capitals and 1 city.
If they were serious about the original intention, they would have planned for 5 capitals and 1 city.
Kaduna, Enugu, and Benin.
So we had 5 capitals in Nigeria at the time:
The city where
Lagos, Ibadan, Kaduna, Enugu, and Benin.
Calabar.
Right? The city where Awolowo was being held captive was Calabar.
Calabar on a bicycle to take Awolowo from
What if I told you that nobody even went near to Calabar on a bicycle to take Awolowo from prison? And it was supposed to be the reason for this stupid coup.
Nobody went to Calabar, even though
Nobody went to Calabar, even though Ademega wrote about it in the book that they wanted to release Awo, but they had no plan. And then if you read Special Branch report, they wrote it there. They had no plans for Enugu, no plan for Bini, definitely no plans for Calabar, which means that makes it very clear. If the first place we are hearing about Awolowo being the object or the reason for the coup happens to be the Eastern Region newspaper, do we not know we are being played by the East? Number 2, there's another book I want to recommend, My March Through Prison by Papa. In that book, Papa actually put the letter he wrote to Ironsi, asking to be pardoned and released from prison. If all this nonsense they said Ironsi was not part of it, he liked it, he was Guinea corn, he was actually going to change Nigeria, why didn't he do anything about that letter? He was there from January 16 to July 29. That's more than 6 months. That's almost 7 months. Yakubu Gowon became head of state on 1st August. Papa was out of prison on the 12th.
Someone said they were looking for a way to pin it on the Yorubas.
Yes.
Was because of our, was because of them. Because again,
They're looking for a way to pin it on the Yoruba people and say, oh, it was because of our, it was because of them. Because again, if you have a group that hates the idea of responsibility, you cannot see growth. You cannot see any coherence. Iroini, be afishe. And you'd be very naive to think that these people are doing anything because of anybody. When it failed, who can we put it on? Let's say, and by the way, if you were here when we read the 1944 plan, you know that these things is not RSF plan, is normal. There's no big deal for certain people to do these things. So he says they're going to make him executive provisional president of Nigeria. That's nonsense, because when you read the book by the people that actually planned that coup, they did not mention anything like that. The book is in the other room. I'd have brought it out and read it. Maybe another time when I'm on camera. I'm in the library right now. So I put some book outside. So I put some books outside close to where I read or stream. Or I just read a book to you. You know what? Give me a second. Let me find that book. I think what I'm going to do is, once we're done with all these things, I'm going to compare what I just did right now. I'll do it again in a larger stage. This all these claims that IBB made, because I would have loved to put it out there as we are, I don't know if we're going to be able to do this. But let me just read this bit. So I won't go deep into it, but I'm going to go deeper some other time. Okay? So I want to... What chapter is that? Alright, so chapter 3 is called The Ideology. That's the ideology behind the coup. So take a listen to what Adewale Ademega said. He says here, politically, we believe that our immediate step would be Politically, we believe that our immediate step would be to correct the worst anomaly of the 1957 Constitution by breaking the country into smaller units or states. In other words, the 4 regions which existed till January 15, 1966 were to die instantly, and on their dead bodies were to emerge 14 states, each of which would be conterminous with 2 of the former 26 provinces of the Federation, except Sokoto and Oyo states, which were to be conterminous with 1 province each. In effect, there will be 17 states each. Sorry, there will be 7 states each in the former North and South. These were to be governed by military governors who would be chosen on their merit and loyalty to the revolution.
And then he talked about how he said we also believed in the immediate release of political prisoners of those days.
And then he talked about Awo. He said we also believed in the immediate release of political prisoners of those days, namely Chief Awolowo, Jakonde, Anthony Naoro, Onitiri, Omishade, and so on. And we saw it. As we saw it, these actions would bring immediate relief to the suffering masses of the West and North, and would generate peace and concord throughout the Federation. That was all he said about Awo. They would release him. Did they release him? Of course not. Because he, the writer of this book, Ademega, was just an idealistic, naive gentleman. But what they planned, and if you find that book, it's a very, I will have a full session to talk about it, where he talked about under our planned revolutionary system, what we're going to do, how we're going to run the government. Everything was military. There was no space for any executive president of Nigeria. That thing was a later revision that started in the Eastern Region's newspaper. Because again, some people's heirloom is propaganda. Bule said it was for Awo during Putapa. Yes, Bule will say it now. Bule will say it was not Igbo coup. I've watched the Putapa and I read this book and I'm just laughing. I think he forgot he said some things in that book, Sha, but it is well. Now let me finish this part. We have to go. I'm going to have another session on this thing. It says those who argue that the original intention of the coup plotters was anything but ethnic refer to the fact that the initial purpose of the plotters was to release Chief Awolowo from prison immediately after the coup and make him the executive provisional president of Nigeria, which is again nonsense. The fact, now listen to IBBO, just watch how Abago jibu all of us, just listen attentively. He says here, the fact that these Igbo officers would do this to a man not known to be a great lover, quote unquote, of the Igbos may have given the coup a different ethnic coloration. But again, I may be wrong here, since this view is speculative. I admit that my position here may be the naive insights of an unsuspecting young officer who viewed events from a distance. That's what IBB said. Oh boy, they should give they should give him an award for best dribbler. Did you see the conclusion? Because I'm reading from his book, and I made sure I didn't jump anything, even though I wanted to leave since. I made sure I did not jump any because I wanted to hear what IBB actually said. I'll read that part again. It says here, I may be wrong. It says, but again, I may be wrong here, since the view is speculative. I admit that my position here may be the naive insights of an unsuspecting young officer who viewed events from a distance. If you hide behind IBB to say it was an Igbo coup, was not an Igbo coup, you don't know what you're talking about. You have not read the book. Anybody that says, I just know that they have not read the book. That's the book. I just read it. To all of us. All of us have read it now. At least we listen. So take this as audiobook. So all of us have read or heard. Baba did not maintain one position. No, it may be this. I think it's this, but I don't think so. But I may not know it. I may not really know it. I was a young officer. I look at from a distance. But Igbo did this. But some people say Igbo did not do it. But maybe Igbo did not do it. Maybe they did it. But guess what? Again, I'm not really saying I know it because I was not really there. I was just a young officer. Maybe these are naive insights. By the time you are done, Oriama spin. You don't know what he has said. Neither here nor there. Are you going to use that as the basis for your argument? Listen, you can't use that book as a basis of your argument on this particular matter. If you do, you are in trouble because you have no. The man finished by saying that this might be the naive insight. So the question is, are you standing on the naive insight? Since the view is speculative, is that your basis of? Somebody says he doesn't want to be pinned down. Yep. All right. So I hope to answer the question about IBB's book. But I'll do this again, and then we'll go deeper into the ideology behind the coup for a civilian administrator in the aftermath of the coup, if it had been successful. As far as, by the way, let me say this: the revolutionary coup was successful in the north. The ethnic coup was successful in the south. But because the people who planned it really wanted an ethnic coup, they made the one who executed the coup in the north to surrender to the ones in the south. And that's why eventually the northerners had a problem with Iransi. You cannot take away you can't remove the fact that Zogu actually planned a revolutionary coup. Although Ademola Ademega was in a revolutionary coup, but you can't also hide from the fact that the real deal that happened in the south was Igbo. And there's no need to be saying yes or no, yes or no. It's just, it is, again, if you see anybody shielding you from taking responsibility for what you, if let's say you made a mistake, that's favor. Be like say God is having mercy on you by letting people just overlook it. It was a mistake. A lot of us make mistakes. But if people know that you did it, right? But they constantly say you don't, and they are saying you don't, maybe you did, maybe you don't. Whenever it pleases them, they can use you. So if they want to deny you of that thing, they will use that part of based on this, it can't get this. When they want to support you, maybe they want to use you maybe for political means, they'll say it's not really what he did. But the point is, no matter what happens, you are not really going to be playing the big boys game. You always be left at you're just a tool. That's why if you notice, when you say some people mess up, they don't even bother explain anything. They know that they did it. Sometimes they will say, oh, they're sorry, but they will never come around and say, we didn't do it, because it's children that throw tantrums, and that's why they cannot be given serious, responsibilities. I'm sure you understand what I'm saying, but we don't have to say everything about that's a But it's been great being here. Let me just read a few things, then we'll have to move. See, I think they really wanted Laduke's blood. You can see they didn't kill Fani Power. To be fair, Fani Power did not have guns, but maybe they wanted. I think you'd be right to say they wanted his blood. They have been talking about this whole Islamization thing and how Laduke was working. Again, some of the things they talk about, Laduke was working with Sadauna, but they're going to have Islamization, but Laduke was a Christian. It's very interesting. Anyway, I think they really, okay, I read that one. Just a few more things and we're going to close. They were not satisfied enough. They couldn't control the North to their satisfaction. They just killed Akintola for killing sake. Their main target was Northerners. So what is it? Laluke was Arion Okakafo. If he got them out and didn't shy away from saying it. Yeah, but yes, he doesn't want to be pinned down. Okay, what else? But why did he even write about the coup? Because he was writing about his service. And he started serving in the 60s, and he couldn't just jump that period to when he became head of state in 85. He has to mention all the journey. He has to tell us how he moved. So I think he was trying not to make the mistake that Ojukwu made. For instance, Ojukwu wrote a book, and not once did he really talk about the war. And if you bought that book, like I did, you would want to read about the war. As a matter of fact, I knew he didn't talk about it before I bought the book, and that's why I didn't want to buy the book. But I decided to buy it because, maybe there are other things I could learn from it. But he didn't talk about it, which is a disservice to himself, right? If you really did so well, how come you couldn't talk about it in your most important book? So for IBB, Journey in Service is his most important book, and he has to talk about his journey and the things that happened around that period. But he didn't want to be like, say, they're on anybody's side. At the end of the day, we know where he is. If you actually listen very well, you'll be hearing, maybe I was a bit naive, maybe I was this way, I was that. He has already told you exactly what he's doing. And I think I'm not the one that will tell you what it is. I'm sure you already figured it out. Somebody says IBB has always wanted to be loved and adored. I guess that's why he's doing that, and I think that's about it. Well, please let's read those books. I think you're going to get more information on things like this. Also, please check out Redomi Books on Telegram. You'll be able to find some materials that will help. It's been nice being here. Thank you very much for a fantastic session today. Tomorrow is another day. We'll be here at 1 p.m. Ife time, West African time. And tomorrow we'll be talking about free education in Western Nigeria. Looking at what Awo did, we'll be looking at his autobiography. But more importantly, I think for that session, we'll be looking at the book by Olufemi Ogunsanwo, Awo, The Unfinished Greatness. I think it's also going to help us a whole lot. But yeah, I've had a great time being here, and I hope we learned one or two things. And please don't let anybody bamboozle you if IVV said anything. Always ask them, have you read the book? Once you read the book, like we just did, everything becomes a lot clearer, and you can't be manipulated. And that's how we should be. After all, we are all children of Awolowo, and we had free education in 1955. There has to be something that makes you different. If in your region this is 2025, right? So we're celebrating 70 years of the inauguration of free education in Western Nigeria. If you think like everybody in Nigeria, then I will wasted this time. But Papa did not waste his time. So the way to show that I didn't waste it is by, doing this research, studying, and being different. Like they say, we are sophisticated, right? Awesome. All right. Thank you very much for being here. Have a lovely evening. For those of us on YouTube and on Facebook, we're going to let you go now. Because we're about to play the anthems. So we usually play the Nigerian anthem and also the Yoruba anthem before we end the live every day. So we're going to do that now, but we're not going to have you on YouTube listen because of copyright issues. But if you want to listen, Facebook Mawambe. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us on YouTube and Facebook. Do have a fantastic evening. See you again tomorrow at 1 p.m. Ife time, West African time. Enjoy yourselves. For those of us on TikTok, we're going to listen to the anthems together. And sorry, I didn't read our folks on YouTube. I apologize. Our folks on YouTube says, why did the Yoruba not have their own army? Oh boy, I'm sorry. I think you asked that question a long time ago. Hey, I'm just saying it. Sorry. Why did the Yoruba not have their own army? Guys, do you mind if I take like a couple of minutes to quickly answer this? There was no region that had an army in the 1960s. So we also have to be careful. There is no Yoruba army, there was no Igbo army, there was no Hausa army, there was a Nigerian army. So the right question would be this: why didn't we have so many officers of Yoruba origin in the army? And the reason is simple. Because we were more concerned about other things like architecture, medicine, nursing, lawyering. So we're the accountants, the architects, the lawyers, the engineers, the doctors. How do you say this? Being in the army was considered actually infra dig for the Yoruba. Right? Like, we had people in the army, but not that many, because you spend all these years in school to become a soldier. That's kind of mindset. I'm not saying it was right or it was wrong. I'm just telling you how we thought of the army at the time. Like, it wasn't something to celebrate like that. I mean, you had so many options. You could be an engineer, you could be a doctor, you could be a journalist, you could be a writer, you could be a lawyer. Being a soldier was just, I beg you. That's why we didn't have a lot of Yoruba people in the army at the time. But the question of having Yoruba army, we couldn't have a Yoruba army. We still can't have a Yoruba army because you need sovereignty to have an army. And you don't need an army. We never needed an army. As far as Nigeria is concerned, there's no reason for looking for an army, unless, of course, you're looking to break up the country. The point is that we didn't have a lot of officers there because we just didn't think it was worth it. Somebody says, we just stopped KG War. No, we didn't just stop KG War. We stopped KG War in 1893. It's almost 100. This is about 80 years after KG War. It wasn't about KG War. It was about not just seeing any... Okay, what was the big deal about becoming a lawyer? Sorry, becoming a soldier. Meanwhile, somebody mentioned OBJ earlier. OBJ would have been part of the coup. The only reason OBJ was not part of the coup was that he was in India when it was being planned, and he got back to Nigeria on the 14th of January. It was Nzogo's roommate. And Zogu told him about it. But it wasn't part of it because it was in India. If you were to be in Nigeria, most likely would have joined them. Would have joined them. But the truth is, being a soldier was not, I mean, it's not like if you're a soldier, they will look down on you, but like, if you look at your options, why would you want to be a soldier? You know? But of course, we still had officers who were soldiers. So that's why we didn't have a lot of officers in the army as well at the time. There's something else. Even when it came to civil service, we had a lot more people in Western civil service than in federal civil service, because the Western civil service paid more in terms of minimum wage than the federal civil service. Right, but that doesn't mean that we didn't have people in the federal civil service. We had people in federal civil service. As a matter of fact, most of those who first started working in, whether it was the MPA, Nigerian Port Authority, or the Nigerian Railway Corporation, or Yaba Tech, or any of those organizations, were Yoruba people. But by the time the Igbos took over in 1960, they showed us pepper by saturating the entire space with lesser qualified people of Igbo origin. I read a document last week. That video should come out before the end of this week, or latest by Saturday. That one about what happened in the federal civil service between 1960 and 1964. People have done terrible things in this country. May God have mercy on all of us. But we can't change if we're going to be shying away from, the facts of history. But nobody here is perfect. And I'm not criticizing or castigating. No, the word is, I'm not castigating any ethnic group, but I'm saying things have been done, and I hope that we understand what has been done so that we can address them appropriately and accordingly, and that way we can begin to heal as a people, rather than hiding behind one finger, which a lot of people have been doing. All right. But thank you very much. Somebody says OBJ for don't buy. Oh, well, thank God. I mean, OBJ was shot now during the war. He was shot in a very interesting part of his body. And we were told that by Alabi Sama in his own book. I think he talked about it I heard this in an interview. It's also in I think, yes. Let me not even go into that book. I don't know. I'm going to be here for another hour if I do. Yeah, it was shot in the bomb. The watch, well done, eh? I took him. All right. I mean, but at least it was at the battlefront. Me, I never fight before, so all respect. I mean, due respect to OBJ. OBJ wrote a book, My Command, and that book was one of the things that got Alabi Sama riled up, got him very angry. He had to write his own book, The Tragedy of Victory. I had those two books. Very interesting read from both sides, but I think I really like. Let me not tell you which one I preferred. But the point is that it's not good to listen to one side and just assume you've read everything. You have to take your time. That's how to understand all these things. But thank you very much for being here. Do have a lovely evening. YouTube will let you go now, and they will play the anthems. Thank you very much.